The roar of motorcycles thundered down the sun-baked highway, a pack of leather-clad bikers cutting through the still afternoon air. They weren't your average riders. This was the Iron Hearts Brotherhood, a group of men and women who had seen the rough edges of life and decided to turn them into something good. They rode for charity, for wounded veterans, and for broken families. But on that particular day, they had no idea that fate was about to test what they truly stood for. The group had just stopped at a small-town diner on the outskirts of Missouri, the kind of place where the coffee's always hot and the gossip flows faster than the syrup. Laughter filled the air as they parked their bikes, their jackets glinting with patches of pride and pain. Then, out of nowhere, a sound shattered the calm. A little girl, no older than 7, came running across the gravel, barefoot, her face streaked with tears and dirt. Her small frame shook with every sob as she stumbled toward the bikers. "Please. Please help my mama," she cried, her voice trembling with desperation. "They're beating my mama." The group froze. Conversations stopped. The leader, a tall man with a gray beard named Tank, immediately knelt beside her. "Hey there, sweetheart," he said softly. "Who's hurting your mama?" The girl, hiccuping between sobs, pointed back toward the line of trees behind the diner. "The men in the trailer park. Mama told them to stop drinking near me, and they got mad. They're hurting her." Tank stood up, his eyes darkening beneath his sunglasses. He didn't need to say a word. The others, Bear, Rooster, Diesel, and the rest, already understood. In seconds, the bikers were back on their motorcycles, the engines growling like a storm ready to break. As they tore down the dirt road the girl had come from, dust and gravel flying behind them, every rider felt a familiar anger in their chest. Each of them had come from hard lives, abuse, addiction, broken homes. They knew what it meant to be powerless. Not today. Not this little girl. When they reached the small trailer park, the scene hit them like a punch to the gut. A woman lay on the ground, her face bruised, her clothes torn, while 2 men, reeking of alcohol, stood over her shouting. Before the men could react, Tank cut the engine and roared, "Enough." The sound was so powerful that it silenced everything. The bikers surrounded the men in seconds. Diesel stepped forward, his fists clenched. "You like hittin' women," he growled. The taller man tried to sneer, but his voice shook. "Ain't your business." Tank's voice was low and deadly calm. "It is now." The confrontation didn't last long. The bikers didn't need to throw punches, they just stood their ground, their presence enough to make the cowards scatter like rats. One of the women in the nearby trailer called 911 while another came running with a blanket for the battered mother. Tank knelt beside her, his gruff exterior softening. "You're safe now, ma'am, we've got you." The woman's eyes filled with tears as she clutched her daughter's tiny hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "Nobody ever came before." But that wasn't the end of it. The bikers stayed with the woman, named Rachel, until the ambulance and police arrived. They gave their statements, ensuring the attackers were taken into custody. But when it came time to leave, the little girl, whose name was Emily, refused to let go of Tank's hand. "Will you come back?" she asked, her voice fragile. Tank looked at her for a long moment, then smiled. "You bet we will." And they did. Over the next few weeks, the Iron Hearts returned again and again. They fixed Rachel's broken door, brought groceries, and helped her find a safe place to live. Emily grew attached to the bikers, calling them her guardian angels with helmets. But their kindness didn't stop there. The Brotherhood decided to raise money for Rachel and other local families escaping domestic violence. They organized charity rides across the state, hundreds of bikers showing up with roaring engines and open hearts. The news spread fast. Soon, donations poured in, and Rachel's story became a symbol of hope for others trapped in silence. Still, it wasn't all easy. The bikers faced backlash. Some people in town whispered that they were just criminals playing hero. Local businesses refused to sponsor their rides. Even some police officers doubted their motives. But the Iron Hearts didn't stop. They'd been judged their whole lives, tattoos, scars, and leather jackets didn't define their hearts. One evening, Tank sat outside Rachel's new apartment, watching Emily play with a small toy motorcycle he'd given her. "You know," Rachel said softly, sitting beside him, "you didn't have to do all this." Tank looked at her and said, "Yeah, we did. Because once upon a time, someone did it for me. That night, as the sun dipped behind the horizon and the sound of laughter filled the air, something changed, not just for Rachel and Emily, but for the entire town. The bikers who had once been feared were now seen as protectors, symbols of strength born from pain. Months later, at one of their charity events, Emily, now smiling and full of life, stood on a small stage holding a microphone. "I used to be scared every night," she said, her little voice steady. "But now I'm not, because the Iron Heart saved my mama." The crowd erupted in applause, many wiping tears from their eyes. And Tank, standing in the back, felt something stir in his chest. He didn't ride for glory or thanks, he rode because every time someone cried out for help, he wanted to be the kind of man who answered. The message was clear: heroes don't always wear badges or capes. Sometimes, they ride on two wheels, with leather jackets, loud engines, and hearts big enough to carry the weight of someone else's pain. And for one little girl and her mama, those bikers weren't just a rescue, they were a second chance at life.